I've read more than 200 business books, and to save you the time, here are my top 5 books for small businesses, particularly in the area of growth. Watch on. As a business accountant, my team and I spend all day long helping business owners on their journey. And of course, the topic of good business book pops up a lot. Now, if you want to grow your business, I don't think you can go wrong with these ones. I've read a ton of them, so to pick just 5 was really, really hard. So what I did was I went with the 5 really important ones that are more growth focused. And I'm pretty sure by the time I've published this video, I'd read at least another couple that would make the list. But these 5 are going to be pretty timeless, regardless of when you're watching it. Now, I've stuck a bonus 6th one at the end. As I got recording this, I thought I couldn't leave this one out actually, so be sure to check that out because I think it's going to be able to give you the time you need to actually do some of these things that these books talk about. So it's going to be really powerful, so stick around for that. So then let's get cracking. The number 1 was, of course, the classic that is the E-Myth Revisited: Why Most Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It. And that was a book by Michael E. Gerber. Now, it's a book that spends a lot of time talking about the topic of systemizing a business, which might sound boring, but is actually really, really important. And it uses stories and businesses like McDonald's as a great example of the concepts in practice. You know, this idea that you can walk into any McDonald's anywhere in the world, you get the same burger, the same fries in about the same amount of time you'd hope. Maybe you wouldn't get the ice cream machine working. And either way, the quality is the same. And that, of course, is down to a system. And he talks about this idea of, you might have started a business in what he calls a entrepreneurial seizure. And it's this idea that, you've taken your job, you've started a job, and, you've now got a crazy boss, and that boss is yourself. And he talks through all of that journey and how to get out of that into an actual business that, can run, it's bigger than you. And I think it's a really, really key book. If there's any book you're going to read, that's got to be the one. And there are ways of doing it. You can either read it manually or you could go on, say, Audible or something like that. And I think there's seminars he's done. There's probably videos on YouTube that you can take it in lots of different ways. But just the old classic read is definitely worth it. And I think when we talk to experienced business owners that have gone through that growth journey, they will almost always speak to the fact that good systems and standard operating procedures, or SOPs as they're often called, are going to be key to growing that business well and making sure that anybody that comes on is able to be trained quickly and easily. And of course, that then you get that consistent product or service being delivered all the time, regardless of who's doing it. So that's what the book's about. Definitely check it out. Link in the description. Next, I've gone with 2 that are both sales and marketing focused. And I think the reason I picked those is, let's face it, getting new customers is always going to be important, regardless of where you are on your journey, but particularly if you're early stages. And the reason that I've picked these 2 specifically is that they're very actionable. I really like practical books, things that you can just take away, checklists, go and read it and have a look. And these particular 2 also require no money to actually do. You see some of these where they're like, okay, go and put out a bazillion pieces of content a day and do this and that, and you think it's okay, but there's a big cost either in time or people. But these 2 books you can very much do on your own. So with no money needed, I think then you're back to really, you just need to make sure you're actually doing the action and that you're getting these habits they're talking about. And most importantly, you're getting the courage to go and do it, because I think where sales is concerned, that's a big hurdle for a lot of owners. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the revenue growth habit, the simple art of growing your business by 15% in 15 minutes per day, by a gent named Alex Goldfein. And he's done a series of these books, but this one for me was the coolest one because it was just a great practical book where Alex shows you multiple different ways to grow your business in, surprisingly enough, 15 minutes a day. And I think that there's lots of lists. It's one of those where you can look at the contents list of it and say, which one do I want help with today? So you don't actually have to read it necessarily front to back. And I actually keep a copy of this book on my desk sometimes for inspiration, or if I'm thinking like, oh, I'm writing a newsletter today, and is there anything else I could do to improve this? It's quite good. It's one of those that you can just go to the contents page and pick an area of focus and go and have a look at doing that better, or even just getting inspiration. And it's got everything from creating sort of valuable email newsletters to how to gather the best testimonials, to how to sort of prospect, speak to existing customers and more. And I think that just picking up a copy and trying some of those habits would be big for a lot of people. Next up, probably the most controversial one on the list, in all honesty, and I think it's particularly for the UK market just because we're slightly more reserved. And I think that's because the author is somewhat Marmite in terms of whether you love what he's about or not. Personally, I like what he does. I find it really inspirational. So it's a cool one to be able to recommend to people. And that book is If You're Not First, You're Last: Sales Strategies to Dominate the Market and Beat Your Competition. Sounds very American, right? And it is, because it's by a gent called Grant Cardone. He does a lot across all the various social medias. But this book was an early one that he did, and I really like it. And the reason I particularly suggest this one to a lot of people is it's the most practical of the series, stories for me, particularly in times of tight economic sort of scenarios, and which I think at the time of recording this video we're in now. I think we've gone past that sort of post-pandemic era, and now it's quite tough again for a lot of small businesses. And this book is quite practical about generating sales and prospects in that kind of time. So the book itself is an absolute beast of sort of a tome of sales and marketing tips, but I think it's mixed in there with a lot of inspiration that most business owners could kind of learn from. And I think that there are parts of this book that many owners may look at as a bit scary because it's a bit more salesy in parts, a bit more direct. But I think that ultimately any owner needs to get good at that. And I think that for this one, I would recommend the audiobook maybe over the written one. I mean, I've got the written one here, and it is a really, really good book. But I think that if you want to get yourself pumped up and listen to it in real time, then the audiobook is quite a good one to do as well. So check that out. Now, next up is a fairly new one. In a book called 24 Assets, Create a Digital, Scalable, Valuable and Fun Business that will thrive in a fast-changing world. That's a mouthful, by Daniel Priestley. So it's this one here. Now, the author focuses on what he believes to be the core 24 assets that your business needs in the modern world to become valuable and scalable, I think is the big one. It's, again, when we're talking about growth. And these assets are anything from, say, video to business valuations to your actual systems and websites and things like that. So I think it fits quite nicely in with the E-Myth style book that I mentioned at book 1, because those two are in tandem, this idea that systems are valuable. And I think as a business grows, you're going to get into this space where, you know, if you're thinking about valuations or you're thinking about getting funding, you're going to want to be able to prove to people why your business is worth something. And all these sort of assets that you create, be it your internal operating systems, your website, your video training, whatever you've done, are going to be things that are going to be taken into account. Does the business actually run without you because of the systems you've generated, that kind of stuff? And I was actually doing some housework while I was listening to this and kept stopping to actually concentrate on it. So it is quite a thought-provoking book. And I think that it shows you, you know, and talks about really where you might want to choose to concentrate on in terms of long-term when it comes to committing things like your time, which is the biggest one, effort and money in the business. And we'll talk about time later on, because of course that's the biggest one, is how do you find the time to do this stuff? But I like it. And with the book also gives you sort of an opinion on the opportunity and success that might be possible if you've got a clear strategy towards developing the value of these 24 assets. So hopefully you can take some inspiration about what assets you'd like to concentrate on in building your business. And also, I think it gives you an idea of what actually could be considered assets, because it's one of those things, it's often in the eye of the beholder. So it's interesting to read. So we're limited time. I think this book makes some great arguments about where to spend that time. So do remember to hang around for that bonus book number 6 to help with the time issues. So the 5th book is one of my favorites. And for me, it's almost a must buy on audio if you can. And the reason is, it's because it's written and told in the form of a story. And I think listening to it on Audible makes it quite good. And that book is this classic, which is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, a leadership fable by Patrick Lencioni. Now, the reason I picked this one for the list is that as a business grows, you will inevitably need to build a team. And it's one of the hardest things to get right. You ask any owner that's done any sort of growth, and they will tell you that people management itself is by far the hardest piece, certainly the most challenging, whether it be recruitment, retention, or just getting people to do what you'd like them to do for the business to grow, all that kind of stuff. So this book really drives home that kind of feeling of why it's important to have a good culture and some real practical looks, I suppose, at how you would achieve that. It's just a really cool story. It's told from the point of a new female CEO taking over like a tech company, but it's quite relatable, I think. So, and it's full of ideas around building the team and insight about what you might do. And I think as a warning, it's quite funny because you listen to it or read it, and it's hard not to recognize some of the people maybe in your own team or in other businesses or employments you've worked in, and just think, oh, that's that person. We definitely have one of those at the last place I worked, or I've got one of those in my team and I need to do something about it. So for me, it's a must read for owners looking to build a team. So then I did say I would have a bonus 6th book, and that's because as I was looking at all of these, the biggest query we get and the biggest chat whenever you get business owners in a room is, I never have enough time. So I thought we really need to add some sort of time management book in here. So for the book that I've picked for number 6 is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, which is this one. It's a relatively recent book, I think. Certainly it's a recent read for me. And I think for most business owners who are constantly battling that calendar and other various pressures, which is like all of us, the book is really a potential game changer. The main reason being is that it lays out a framework in, again, talking of practical, as I said in the video, all these books for me are very practical. It gives a practical framework about how you could scale your personal impact. And of course, the idea is to do this without burning out by doing 100 odd million hours. And it's mixed in the usual thing, you know, stories about X and Y, but with an actual practical framework. And what I loved most about this one is, as I said, how actionable it is. It doesn't just preach about the productivity and template diaries and all the things things you might have heard in other books. It gives you this buyback loop, I believe he calls it. And the idea is then that you can kind of audit your time, delegate smartly, build this life that you're going to enjoy. You know, it's that kind of pitch. But what I really liked about it, though, is that the book gives away some external practical links as well. So he'll give you, for example, he talks a lot about how to work with an executive assistant and gives his playbook, as he calls it. And that's literally a Google Doc that shows you his standard operating procedures around how he manages his inbox with his assistant, for example. And I think they're really cool things to read. And if you do that yourself, it's good to compare different people's views on it and see if you can nick something from it and learn from it. So really, really cool book. But I thought either way, it's good. And of course, like many of these authors, he's got a YouTube channel and things you can check out for sort of more context and more speeches he gives around these issues, as many of the authors have. So do check both the book out and I think the other channels if you can, because I find they're all quite useful to read in sort of conjunction and deep dive into them as a person and an author and just learn about the topic a bit more. And as always, with all these books, you won't agree with all of it. I mean, like I said, in that book, if I said the word house manager, I think many of us in the UK might raise a few eyebrows and think, okay, that's an interesting concept. But for some people, it would definitely work. So I think it's worth having a read if you're looking to gain any sort of time and checking that one out. Now, finally, I did talk about a potential missing seventh book. So you might have noticed, accountant, talking about books, you'd expect there to be probably a finance book in here. And the reason I've not talked about it is, apart from the fact when we're talking about top 5 growth books, I'm not sure a finance book would necessarily make it, even though, of course, bias aside, it's a critical part of growing your business. The main reason is I just haven't come across one that is actually any good yet. Maybe someone should write one. Anyway, I'm sure you've all got your own recommendations, so please do share in the comments. I'm always looking for more book recommendations and things to read. I've done loads of them and always particularly Audible these days. You can just listen while you do other stuff or walk the dog, do the gym, whatever. So if you do have any recommendations, do drop them below in the comments for all to enjoy. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to click the subscribe button and the bell below so you get notified whenever we release more just like this one. Please do share it with anybody you think needs to know this information, and I'll see you in the next one.